and I just realized my mic was off. So here we go. So I'm glad that I didn't go any further with that. So anyway, I wanted to say this is what happens when I'm gone for 2 weeks. I end up just completely losing track of everything. So we are very happy to be here, and let me just got a little thing going on over here. We're happy to be here. We missed last week. In case you didn't know, there was a big electrical storm came through the Fort Smith area last Thursday night or Thursday last week. We dodged most of the damage, although we did find out what happens when a large electrical charge encounters your internet equipment. So we're back online, have been for a few days now. The worst damage, though, that was occurred to anybody that we know in town had to be the Fort Smith Trolley Museum. Our thoughts and our hearts are out to the folks over there. Very fine organization, helping to also tell history of this area. And they suffered some major damage to their building as a result of what happened with that storm. They lost part of their roof over their gift shop. Nobody was hurt, none of their collections were hurt as far as we know. But if you're in the Fort Smith area and you feel like helping somebody out, you might want to throw them something. The other things here, I know as usual, I am going to plug that we are still selling bricks. We have our first shipment of bricks in, and hopefully within the next month they're going to be in the ground, and I'm sure we'll let everybody know when that happens. But you can get your personalized bricks. You can get those on our go to our Facebook page or go to our main webpage, usmmuseum.org, and you can get to the brick campaign. You can also get to our GoFundMe. Anything, any gift helps. So we're always looking forward to that. We can't wait to have the museum set up in such a way that folks are going to be able to come out and take a look at what we have, so we can share this story better in person. Along the lines of anything else today specifically, I know I wanted to talk about this last week, but due to things that happened and what we couldn't get worked out, we are going to show a public premiere of the passing of the Oklahoma Outlaws. This is a silent film from 1915. This is a film that was produced, and I talk about this, you're going to hear me prattle on as part of the voiceover on a audio commentary that I recorded for this. We did a private preview of this about a year ago in Tulsa. We had about 100 or so people in attendance to that event, and we're really proud of what we were able to do as the Marshals Museum. While doing some research in some different topics, about 3 years ago, I found out that the Library of Congress held a copy of both Passing of the Oklahoma Outlaws and The Bank Robbery, two films that were done, which we actually found out that they also have The Wolf Hunt, which is a whole different thing. 3 films that were done by a small production team that was led by Bill Tilghman. The origins behind this were President Roosevelt, of all people, was in Oklahoma on a tour, encountered some cowboys who were able to, one in particular, who was able to capture wolves alive. Essentially, he would ride on horseback, ride up alongside, tackle them, and then jam his arm down the throat of the wolves. And then he was able to capture the wolves. And people in Washington, D.C. didn't believe Roosevelt when he told these stories, so he sent a note back to Oklahoma basically saying, get this on film so I can show my buddies so they don't think I'm a liar. Nobody knew how to make a film. Like nobody in that Oklahoma area knew how to do this or to organize anything, and somebody figured, you know what, Bill Tilghman, holler at him. If anybody can get this done, Bill Tilghman will know how to get it done. And so Bill Tilghman, not knowing anything about films, he knew some people who knew how to do this. So he ended up organizing it. The Wolf Hunt was produced, and they sent that off a few years later. That was 1907-ish, about 1910. Some folks, let me take a look here, let's see. 1910 or so, they did the bank robbery, and in 1915, they did the passing of the Oklahoma Outlaws. And you're going to see that here. For anybody who has ever seen the film You Know My Name, starring Sam Elliott, you'll recognize a lot of the stuff in here because a lot of the subplot of You Know My Name is showing bits and pieces of Passing of the Oklahoma Outlaws. And in almost all of those cases, they reenacted scenes from this film. And in one scene, specifically the case of Bill Tilghman going to go arrest Bill Doolin in here in Arkansas, they actually made up that scene just from whole cloth. That that doesn't exist as far as we know. There might have been a description of that scene that that somebody has described, but as far as I know, that scene doesn't exist. I know that one of the things that makes this particular film special that you're going to see is that there's about 8 minutes of this film. Most of the first reel that is on this presentation, as well as a couple minutes in the middle of it, that is not on any of the currently publicly available footage that's out there. When we found out that the Library of Congress had these, we contacted them. We paid for them to digitize both Passing of the Oklahoma Outlaws and the bank robbery. We did both of those at a level, for those of you who understand the technology on this, we did them to a level of 1080. And so the Passing of the Oklahoma Outlaws had never been scanned, and the bank robbery had only previously been done at 720. So they are both at the Library of Congress digitally at 1080. So we were able to get that done. We have copies of those, and we're going to be using those in our museum experience when we are able to produce those. Once we get our fundraising done, we get moving on that. So I know you guys don't want to hear me talk right now and look at my face. You guys would rather sit and watch Passing of the Oklahoma Outlaws. So you guys will now be the first people in the public generally to be able to watch the longest version of Passing the Oklahoma Outlaws. So you might want to really quickly get up, go get a drink or something, come back, because you've got 23 minutes of watching this. And I'll be presenting some information during the course of it about the history of the film, the events going on, the people in the film, and giving you an idea of what is some of the stuff that's going on. So with that all said, I'm going to go ahead and start up the Passing of the Oklahoma Outlaws. Enjoy the film.
Welcome to the inaugural showing of the most complete version of the Passing of the Oklahoma Outlaws that has been seen by the public. Passing of the Oklahoma Outlaws was produced by the Eagle Film Company in 1914. It is a film created by and starring former deputies, U.S. Marshals, and others from what is now Oklahoma, what was then Oklahoma Territory and Indian Territory. The main feature of this is the Battle of Ingalls, which took place September 1st, 1893. That's what you see on the screen right now. And it continues on over the next several years as there are different incidents in which the members of the Doolin and Dalton Gang and others were captured or killed. What we have available here are 3 reels of what we believe were 6 reels out of the complete film. A lot of this was produced as a result of the Marshals Museum taking part in making sure that these films were digitized to the most modern standards. But to get caught up with a little bit of what's going on screen right now, as part of this battle, you have what we have available here are 3 here. That was Arkansas Tom sitting in that room. And this is supposed to be Rose Dunn, the girlfriend of George Bitter Creek Newcomb, taking part in the battle. Rose Dunn went on to some notoriety, but she was believed in this battle to have been passing along ammunition. That was Bill Doolin that you just saw there, who went last round. That was just about the time that you're going to see a few other folks come through here. Arkansas Tom, he actually plays himself in this film. And which is really amazing because he'd already been to prison, gets out of prison, goes off to Hollywood to try to get into film, and then comes back, plays himself, only to go and rob a bank a few years later, get arrested, and go back into prison. It's really crazy watching some of these scenes as they show up and how they present things, because many of these people were here at this battle. A lot of these characters are former deputies and former gang members who are coming out and taking part and playing these roles that they just know way too well. So in a lot of ways, there's Tom again, coming in with his rifle. Tom is credited with providing cover fire for the escaping members of the gang, and as he was one who actually is credited with killing Deputy Marshal Houston, who you just saw getting shot. Bill Dalton and Bill Doolin were the other two. Bill Dalton is the person who's believed to have killed Deputy Shadley coming up here. Even though I think they showed that is Doolin rolling some more. The film production on this is amazing when you consider who it was who was involved and how they did this with the lowest budget possible. The members of the production team for this, they were E.D. Nix, the former U.S. Marshal for the territory of Oklahoma, Bill Tilghman, and Chris Madsen. Also part of this were John Hale, another former deputy, and then Caleb Brooks, who was a former U.S. District Attorney. So they all knew each other and worked together, and they had seen films like the year before this, the criminal Al Jennings, who oddly enough was in the bank robbery, one of the other films that Bill Tilghman produced. Here's Deputy Speed being killed. Deputy Speed was credited with being killed by Bill Doolin when the real event took place. But with the way that the production was done, a lot of this was in response to Al Jennings and a film that he starred in based on a book of his life, which was produced the year before this. Al Jennings presented the film as if he was a good guy and the lawmen were the bad guys. Oh, and this is the famous Catalani and Little Britches as they come to get them so they can get out of the way. But the film was produced as a response to that, so they could show the real work that was being done by these people as they did their jobs as lawmen in the West. And a lot of these characters, as much as what happens in Hollywood today, you see a lot of differences in who the characters are and the people who are portraying them. Catalani and Little Britches in real life were 11 and 14 years old, much younger than the two women who were portraying them there. Rose Dunn, at the time that this was going on, she was 14, and that definitely did not look like a 14-year-old climbing out of the window. Here we come into the third reel. They come up with the horses. They're at the hideout. And just for the set dressing, you see the top, what looks like it might be rock is a canvas framework that is up across the top. They understood even that early that these films were in black and white. You could do pretty much anything you would want. And then the most horrific episode of taxidermy I've ever seen. I'm not sure exactly why they have the wolf in there. That was just a strange little thing, maybe. But with a lot of this, they're now off to the raid in Pawnee, Oklahoma. They're going to rob the bank there. The fight at Ingalls was September 1st of 93. This is January 23rd of 94. So not even 6 months has passed. And I can't tell if this is actually in Pawnee, Oklahoma or not. The film company itself for the production of this was based out of Chandler, and they did try to film in the area. There were scenes later on near Guthrie that were filmed on the Dunn Ranch. And so, yes, that's the same family that Rose Dunn, George Newcomb's girlfriend, was part of. And her brothers, they were bounty hunters who ended up being credited with killing Bitter Creek, and as well as another member of the gang, Pierce. And so they were filming these scenes in a lot of cases on the same locations where some of these things took place. Later on, there's some scenes that involve the Jennings gang. That was on a different reel that nobody knows of. Apparently, Bud Ledbetter was involved with the filming and the actual original events, but that was filmed on the ranch where Bud Ledbetter caught up with the Jennings gang. So now they've split the take. Bill Dalton plans to leave the country, or at least leave the area. And you have Doolin going to go meet the woman he eventually marries, Edith Ellsworth. And this is one of a few cases where they did some early examples of what Hollywood referred to as shooting day for night, where you shoot during the day and you would kind of pretend, or in some cases put a filter on the lens to show that it's night. And another hallmark of filmmaking from that time frame is you couldn't have really effective indoor lighting, so a lot of indoor sets were actually outdoor sets that were open tops, so you'd be shooting in full sunlight in order to have some decent light. And you can tell on those shots, in this case, by the wind blowing the tablecloths. And so you've got the marshals trying to come in and get the jump on Bill Doolin. But talking about the ages of all the people involved here, so many of them were well off of the ages of the actors. Many of the members of the gang were in their mid to late 20s. Many of the members of the lawmen, when these events were taking place, the three guardsmen were all, Bill Tilghman was the youngest at 39, Heck Thomas was the oldest at 43. And then you have Bill Tilghman here in a second. They're getting ready to come up on where the gang's hiding out as they start to search around for them. And some of this right here is believed to have been about March 20th of 1894 that Bill Tilghman comes upon all of this. And we're coming right up. This next scene is going to be, one of these next scenes is going to be the very first scene that's actually in some of the existing footage of the film that is currently in existence online. So if you went to YouTube or some other places, you'd be able to find this. It starts in this scene. Everything else that you have just seen for the last 10 minutes is all brand new footage, and you were the first people to have seen this film. And so Bill Tilghman's coming upon where Doolin is, and they're all hiding out. In the attempts by some people to edit different versions of this. This is one scene where, since this is supposed to be a very dark room, they've actually tinted this whole scene blue every time they go into the dugout, which is just an odd thing when you look at what they're trying to do. But I do love how they present this with this little set that they've built to make it look like a dugout. And it's all outdoors, and they even built up a ramp by where the door is. And you see all of the old quilts that we consider as keepsakes and hand-me-downs that all these cowboys are all using for fresh. Here, Bill Tilghman's lawman sense kicks in as he starts to realize he may be in more trouble. But that very definitely, that Bill Tilghman is a little bit older than the 39-year-old who chased after the gangs back then. A lot of the things that were happening at this time, you still have issues within the different groups. And so now we go get back, as soon as we get done with the scene, we get back to a situation with, this is again, all new footage that has not been seen in public before. And that's Edith Ellsworth getting ready to marry Bill Doolin. And so many of these people, at least we have some ideas now of where they went and what they did. As the different people in the gang broke up and split off, and then came back together, or they had a major robbery and then went to ground, and then came back, and then they just continued to live their lives as they were continuing to be bad guys or good guys. Keeping in mind that at that time, Bill Doolin was about 35 years old. And again, he's a older actor trying to play him.
And all of
the different people who are the women involved. Typically, the actors are 10 or 15 years older than a lot of the actors than the real people that they're portraying. And so that's part 3 ending with Doolin saying he's going to take one more job and then they're going to go. And the next job is going to be May 10th, 1894. Doolin robbing the bank at Southwest City, Missouri. Southwest City, Missouri was at the time a pretty good size settlement across all three states, right where Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma all touch each other. It stretched across. It was a trading center. It was where a lot of members of the Cherokee tribe would take their crops to get shipped to points east. And this is one of those cases where a number of the citizens ended up fighting back. And you start to really get to a point that the gang is going to start falling apart as they start to realize that the heat is on way too much, and they need to start making sure that they're safe, especially now that Doolin is married and at least by this film has a son.
Doolin wiping the supposed blood off his forehead. And so after this, Doolin went into hiding with his family, and you'll see them getting into the wagon here in a bit. They went into Mexico and eventually ended up in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. And in Eureka Springs is where Bill Tilghman ended up finally running him down, captured him. Took him back over to Oklahoma, and then in Oklahoma he ends up escaping, and then they end up capturing him again finally in 1896 over in Pawnee and Payne counties, where he ends up getting killed. Then Catalani and Little Britches finally get their due. And again, they don't look like an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old. And this scene actually plays out pretty close to what actually happened. One of the girls got yanked out the window that she was trying to either climb out of or look out of. And the other one got off on her horse, shooting at Tilghman, and Tilghman returning fire. It was very definitely this is one of the more accurate scenes that was portrayed in the film. What's odd is in a couple of cases where the scenes aren't accurate or the dates aren't accurate, even though they had the original people, they had in some cases original records of a later train robbery that took place and the killing of one of the gang members. They were about 6 months off on when they thought it happened. Or when just other little questions the character of Rose Dunn who shows up at Battle of Ingalls. Rose Dunn is a character that we're still not sure who she is. She was not mentioned in any of the reports at the time. She didn't seem to have any impact really on the Battle of Ingalls. And yet she is portrayed quite strongly here in this film. Catalani and Little Britches, they did go to a reform school for a couple of years. Catalani ended up, I believe, disappearing into this history, and Little Britches ended up getting married and lived up into her 90s. And here we are. Red Buck taking over the gang. And this train robbery was on October 5th, 1995. Historically, it was April 3rd of 95. They robbed the train in Dover, Oklahoma, and made off with a decent amount of money. And then so the marshals, knowing where they're hiding out, they send a telegram to Chris Madsen, on the left receiving the telegram. And so off he goes. And again, this is pretty much how it happened. Madsen grabbed the posse, threw them all on the train. Train went back to the nearest point. They all got off and started chasing after Red Buck's gang of criminals. And as with the earlier film, they did the bank robbery. They did use local Indian cast members where they felt it was appropriate. In the film The Bank Robbery, for example, they used the Chief Quanah Parker to play himself is one of the final scenes of that film. And all of the deputies got 20 years on from where they once were. And Tulsa Jack says there again, October 6, 1895. This was April 4th. 1895. So all of these events took place about 6 months to almost 6 months to the day prior to when they were telling them as part of their recollections. And most of the bad guys in these different gangs, the entire group was killed or captured by end of 1896, 1897. There were a few of these guys who lived on into the 20th century. Al Jennings, he's not in this film. Al Jennings lived on and got involved in a number of different things. You have in this case Arkansas Tom, he lives on. And they all went on to some notoriety, just continued to get involved in robberies and in and out of jail. But they started to realize in a lot of cases, not just the lawmen, but also the bad guys could make a lot of money selling their stories in books, playing themselves in movies. And there we go. Outlaws do what they do because they are what they are. Kind of an absolutist view. But it typified a lot of what people thought these were at the time. And Pearson Creek returned to their old haunts historically being just a little bit outside of Norman, Oklahoma. And most of this being filmed somewhere up around the area of Chandler. So really between the historic town of Ingalls down into the area of Pottawatomie County, all around up through that region over into Guthrie. And unfortunately, we don't have the other reels on this film. By different accounts, they showed them capturing the Jennings gang. They also showed them capturing the Star Gang, Henry Star Gang, which I thought was personally interesting because Henry Star was never pursued really by this particular group of deputies. And you might think that these guys are all deputies. But it wasn't the deputies who ended up finding these two guys, it ended up that Pierce and Bitter Creek were killed by the Dunn brothers. And the Dunn brothers were the brothers. They were bounty hunters who were none other than the brothers of Rose Dunn, who was Bitter Creek's girlfriend, who was the one climbing out of the window with the Winchester during the Battle of Ingalls. And so many people for years gave her a hard time, claiming that she sold Newcomb out and turned his location over to her brothers so they could make all the money. And with that, we have the passing of the Oklahoma Outlaws.
So there you have it, the passing of the Oklahoma Outlaws, one of the earliest fact-based films on the Marshals, on lawmen in general. As I'd mentioned during the voiceover on that, a lot of this was in response to a film Al Jennings had done the year before this, in which he really tried to show off as being a much smarter, much better person than he actually was. Additionally, it was an attempt to also show law enforcement as being inept and bumbling. And so a lot of the people who were involved in doing this particular job, they all decided that they wanted to do this film. This was the third film that they had done. They'd already done, as I mentioned prior to this, about 1907 they did The Wolf Hunt. About 1910 they did the bank robbery, which was all shot down around Lawton, Oklahoma, which apparently at one point, because they didn't really tell anybody what was going on, that some people who didn't see the film cameras thought it was real and tried to go get the real sheriff. And so it was a really neat another piece, but that was a little bit more fictional. But all of the people who were involved in the production of this, they tended to be law enforcement, with the one person being what was his name? Arkansas Tom. Arkansas Tom actually playing himself. And as I mentioned earlier, you have the film You Know My Name, starring Sam Elliott. It starts out with them in the middle of filming this movie, or filming another film. It was filming this movie, and they had Arkansas Tom on set talking to Sam Elliott's character of Bill Tilghman, and they're working back and forth talking about the realism aspects of it, but they have a different actor playing Arkansas Tom. In the film that you just saw, Arkansas Tom played himself. So I'm seeing a couple of questions. There was a question about where the museum's located. The building is built, constructed, finished here in Fort Smith, Arkansas, on the banks of the Arkansas River. For more information on that, you can always go to our webpage, usmmuseum.org. The only issue there is that the museum is not open to the public. We are still doing fundraising towards building our exhibits. We want to make sure that the museum experience is done correct, but we also want to make sure that it is fully funded before we start building it, the same way that we did with the museum, the building itself. The building is taken care of. We're just waiting to get that next step. And so kind of a phase 2, if you will. There was a question, the comments, let's see here. Bitter Creek and Pierce had buckshot in the bottom of the feet when turned in. Yeah, they were shot when they were laying down. That's one of the things that I've heard a lot of people talk about, is that some of these guys were assassinated more so than they were captured in an outright gunfight. I know that at one point, it was after the difficulties at the battles of Ingalls, the U.S. Marshal E.D. Nix, he was in a conversation with the judge there in Guthrie, Oklahoma territory. And the judge had told basically, you know what, all this would be a lot easier if we don't try to capture these guys alive. And so with those marching orders, it kind of percolated out to the deputies that you really don't have to bring them back alive. So that started to be a little bit less of an issue. But there were just so many different neat ways that they tried to present this. I wish we had the other 2 reels. I think we've got here most of 4 of the 6 reels of this film. The 2 reels, they're out there. I described what we believe is on a couple of those. Our understanding of this is somewhat based off of secondary research performed by other people, but we also I think it was the archives at the Cowboy Museum, Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City. I was looking through the archives through there, and I found a copy of a letter from Zoe Tilghman, a couple of letters in there from her to different people, but one of them described what the production was on these films and had different dates and the people who were involved and who paid for them. And so she went into quite some detail about these productions. Granted, though, being the spouse of a dead figure of the American West, whether you're looking at Zoe Tilghman, if you're looking at Bill Cody's wife, if you were looking at the spouse of anybody else of any repute of the American West who wrote a book about that person after that person passed away, you tend to have to take some of what they say with a grain of salt. But the comments that she was making in this letter were very much along the lines of stuff that was unrelated to her husband. It was just business matters. Question of where in Arkansas was Tom from? I don't know where Arkansas Tom was from. Granted, you have to remember that Arkansas Tom might have been from Boston, Massachusetts. Just a lot of people tended to pick up nicknames related to just strange stories sometimes. It's good. It's very well possible that he is from Arkansas somewhere, but I don't, without having to go to Google or somewhere else, I wouldn't know where Arkansas Tom was raised. And if somebody else on the stream here, I know Mike Sheriff and some others might have an idea as to where Arkansas Tom was actually from. But as a historian, as a film nerd, as somebody who's just really interested in some of the theatrics here and how they did kind of a realistic fictionalization of the historic events that all of these people were involved in, it's amazing how accurate they are, but it's also amazing how much, like, some scenes, like they had a date card prior to the scene that might be 6 months or a year off of when the actual event happened. That simply is one of those things I like to point out to people a lot when we're talking about things in the Old West. We have resources they can never dream of. We have Wikipedia, we've got, which is much fun, is we'll all make of Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a really good source of information that we can all correct ourselves. But you don't want to take Wikipedia as the end-all be-all. You want to take a look at the sources on that article and see where they come from. But they didn't have Wikipedia, they didn't have Ancestry, they didn't have Find a Grave, they didn't have a lot of the resources, newspapers.com, that we have today that we can use to double-check and triple-check dates, places, who was where, who did what. That's usually one of the easiest ways to that we have found to defeat nonsense that comes up because of people's perceptions of particular figures of the American West. When you start to find out, well, he couldn't have met this person at this place because he was if you've got 2 different people, it said person A met person B in a location. Well, you couldn't have done that because person A was actually in this other town and person B was in another town. Or just you find out different things that make situations completely impossible. And so that's just part of the detective work that it takes to be a historian, which that's all the fun, is finding this stuff out. There are so many stories that we have here that we cannot wait to tell. Some of it is holding up the stories to say, yeah, this is really true, and we're really excited to tell these stories. Some of it is because we get to start going around with a needle in a balloon factory and start popping everybody's bubbles. So there you go. I knew I had a guess that Mike Sheriff was going to be able to figure that one out. Mike Sheriff, Tom just called himself Arkansas, but he was born in Missouri. So there we go. There's an answer on that one. Yep. So, yeah, and again, there's so many people whose names were not what they even claimed to be. So unless we get some other neat questions going on here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be calling this one. We've been on for a while. Very glad to be able to share this with you guys. I love this film. I love all of this stuff that they do in here, and it's really a lot of fun to see it. At some point, we're going to have to release this as a file with alternate both organ accompaniment as well as my nonsensical rambling voice accompaniment doing the commentary. We are looking next week. I'm going to be talking to a person from Little Rock on the subject of women's suffrage, and we are looking at I think I just accidentally, did I hang up on somebody? Somebody tried to call in on my phone. So we're looking at a women's suffrage, and because right now, I don't know if you caught the news this week, Susan B. Anthony just received a presidential pardon, and Susan B. Anthony, though, was also, that pardon is for an arrest which was made about, let's see, what was it, 1872-ish by the U.S. Marshals. And so we have images we released earlier this week of the National Archives held warrant for her arrest. We're going to start doing a small exhibit here in the windows at the museum, and we're looking forward to showing that to everybody. So hopefully be back here next week. I'll have an interview with this individual from Little Rock, and we'll be talking about Susan B. Anthony, we'll be talking about the Marshals, we'll be talking about women's suffrage and the 19th Amendment. So thank you very much for all coming. Thank you for taking part in the discussion. I'm glad you all had a chance to watch and listen. And if you have any other questions that come up about this, please feel free to holler at us on our Facebook, our webpage, wherever. But yeah, by all means, go to the webpage, pick up, well, buy a brick, drop off some money in our GoFundMe. And thanks again for coming out on a Friday. I missed you all last week. I'm so glad to be back. So thanks a lot, and you guys have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. Stay safe.